Okay, we're back. Mr. Charlie Inch. Inch. So sometimes I want to say Inch. I don't know why.
Because there's a lot of inches in around here, but
I work with one,
Yeah,
actually. Okay,
yeah.
that's probably why, because it's Inch.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to wrap up.
Yeah.
Kind of wrap it up a little bit. I want you to give your contact information again and your website. And one of the things that we want to talk about during this segment is with your journey, your personal journey, and what you discovered and putting together the team. How does your clients interact, or how does they fit into what you're doing? Are you encouraging them to take the same journey? What's that process with your clients?
So here's what it's done as a lawyer for me, having worked on these things. I'm much more conscious whenever I am interviewing a client, trying to actually ask them what happened to them and understanding in a different way who is it that they are.
Okay.
And so that starts to tease out where you might think that they could use some help. One thing that we run into is that in many times the law is used as a weapon.
Yes.
And if you employ trauma-informed practices as a lawyer, then you can start turning the law into a tool as opposed to a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
So if you know about number 3 and number 4 when it comes to defending a client, then you can actually pinpoint where they could get the biggest bang for their buck if they are motivated to actually do the work. So you empower them, you partner with them, you give them a voice and a choice, you be transparent about what the process is, you give them safety, you try not to re-traumatize, and through empathy and understanding, you try to think about what is it that they don't know that could really help us, and then we can get them to the professional. So here's a story. I had a client come to me a couple years ago for an embezzlement charge. She was in charge of a lot of embezzlement. Means that you are an employee and you've taken your employer's money.
Mm-hmm.
So she had the opportunity to secret away $10,000 during lunch break.
Oh wow!
They came back. Someone noticed it was missing. She was the only person that had gone into the room over lunch break. She takes them to the center console of her car and says, here's the money. They get it all back. Then they ask her, they said, well, why did you do it? Mm-hmm. She says, I did it to show that I could. Right? Not a very good statement that you want when you're dealing with a $10,000 embezzlement charge.
Wow.
She comes to me. I take her case. We show up to General District Court. She brings a friend with her, and this was a young lady. She no criminal charges ever in her past. Hygiene was good. Was put together. I believe that she was part of the National Guard in some way, and so otherwise a person that you would not suspect would find themselves in this difficulty.
Right.
And that's the thing about criminal law is many people don't plan on getting into that situation.
Not at all.
They're not even paying attention to the thing that I'm getting ready to do is illegal. Now, of course, this young lady did. First court case, she brings an old manager of hers with her for support. And that manager pulls me aside and said, Charlie, do you know about her abusive boyfriend? And I said, well, didn't know before, but we're about ready to find out, right? So she comes out. So I asked my client about this inquiry that her friend gave.
Mm.
The client says, he wasn't abusive. I mean, he cut me off from all my friends and family. He controlled the purse strings of the relationship. He verbally abused me and emotionally abused me, but it was verbal and emotional abuse, but he never hit me.
Right.
Okay. And I said, I think we're getting a little closer to what we're aiming at. Thank goodness we have a continuous. Let's see if we can get you some battered women's. Because that's usually the physical abuse is not the first thing to start. It's usually all the other things. All the other things. Yeah. It's tearing down their emotional self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
It's if you think of Maslow's hierarchy of need: physiological, safety and security, love and belonging, self-esteem. Right. And so it's almost, if you think about it, you're reversing, you're breaking down all those individual levels.
Yes.
Of Maslow's hierarchy. Right. And now you can get to the safety and security part is eventually where I think it goes. I don't think that people that do the abusing think of it that way, but I think that it's just a natural tendency because those are the things you can get away with.
Right.
Right. And so
because it's not seen.
Right.
It's
Right.
felt.
Right.
And,
Right.
and it's carried
Right.
in the
And it's
body.
also really hard to show to someone else that
Yes.
it's happening.
Yes.
Because the people that can gaslight, the people that can do those things have the ability to turn it on and off, whether they realize it or not.
Right.
And so this young lady tells me this. I tried to send her to therapy, but COVID prevented that. I finally got her to start reading Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, because I said, we need to tell the judge something.
Mhm.
Because the Commonwealth was refusing to let us not get it out of felony lane.
Oh, wow.
Right? And so this young lady's going to get a felony for this stuff. I'm not saying she didn't do the crime on its face, potentially, right? But with this, getting her, when I met her outside the court, before we went into circuit court, the first instance, she had waterfall tears coming down her face, holding up the book and said, Inch, I didn't put two and two together.
Yeah.
She said, this book, I remember, she said, when I was 2 or 3 years old or whatever age, I watched my father rape my mother. And she said, I didn't stop to think about a day or two before I took the money, allegedly, that my boyfriend had actually choked me. And now that I'm looking back at it, what I was really scared of was that it was going to happen again.
Yeah.
And the next time it happened, it was going to be rape.
Yeah.
And she said, I didn't stop to think about that was what my mental thought process was going.
Wasn't there.
Right. But unless you have done this work, and I hate this thing because it's such a privileged phrase to say done the work, right? Or it's shaming to other over not whether I do work. Unless you have gone on this journey,
right,
you don't develop the grace and forgiveness for yourself. And forgiveness is letting go of the energy of the event that happened, positive or negative. That's why forgive and forget is forgetting that it happened, right? So forgiveness is not a pardon, but it's just letting go of the energy, right?
Exactly.
And so few of us think about forgiveness in that way. And so if you have a negative image of yourself, you don't like yourself, and then one of the things you need to look at is, how am I speaking to myself? What are there these things that are shaming me? If you cannot give yourself grace and forgiveness for the things that you do, then you cannot give anyone else grace and forgiveness.
Not at all.
Right? And so really that's the birthplace of them understanding they're really doing the best they can with what they have right now.
Based on,
and I did the best I could with what I had. And so, or what I had, but I've now worked on those things, and I'm now conscious of what I was reacting to, why I was reacting, and how I can start responding instead of reacting.
Exactly.
Right? And so when I talk about this judge then gave me the option with this young lady to get her into counseling and come in and do, when we talk about criminal law, there's one thing that's called a...
you were able to talk about this in court?
Yeah.
And explain to the judge this?
Right. Now, it's not been finalized, but the judge is giving me the opportunity to bring the therapist in to explain to him what is going on with this, so that I can see if he's willing to take this under advisement. There's case law that says that judges inherently have the ability to take a case under advisement and potentially either not find her guilty or find her guilty of a lesser sentence. And so this is the opportunity that I now have, even though the facts were terrible.
Yes.
So, but knowing that this other thing exists, being able to break into that, get her to buy into it, empower her, partner with her. Show her where she can go, contact that counselor and say, this is what I see as a professional. You do your work. I'm not trying to do your work, but this is what I see. This is what she told me. This is what I feel in my heart. Has some validity here. I need you to do your work. You need to be available. You need to have some vulnerability and courage to come into court and be willing to be cross-examined by the Commonwealth. But unless we actually believe in this stuff and want to make those sorts of differences, that system is going to remain exactly the same unless you try to do these things. And we try to bring this. We talk about justice reform, right? We talk about all these other things, yet there's no one knows about this other aspect, because criminal law is for the other people, and those are bad people, except for when it's our loved one that's going through it. Suddenly, it's usually not us, it's usually our loved one, right? It's our loved ones, and then you see how they're treated by these other people, and you see that there's that shame attached to it by those other people. Like, you shouldn't even be here. You should have known better. Right? And we do all these things, and it's just so shameful on us as a society that we could do better, but we're not choosing to see where we can.
Because we don't know. A lot of times we don't know.
Right.
I mean, how many attorneys really understand trauma?
I don't even want to guess.
Exactly. So that's a part of the process,
Right.
and for her to be able to make that connection.
Right.
You know what I heard when you were talking about that? I was thinking about your ankle.
Yeah.
You didn't make the connection between
Nope.
your ankle and your
Nope.
migraine headache.
Even I knew it happened.
And you knew it happened.
I knew it happened,
And
but
the person said, "So when did you break your ankle?"
it's
It's
like 8 years
oh,
ago.
It's not a big deal.
Yeah, I didn't even put it on my medical history.
No.
That's how insignificant it was. I didn't even put it on my medical history.
And that's how she was.
Right.
That relationship is insignificant,
Right.
but she had this information stored in her body.
Right.
From
Right.
the age of
the
3.
body keeps the score. And
So
if you haven't, if your listeners haven't heard of that book,
I recommend it.
I definitely recommend it. It's in 3 parts. The first one is adult trauma. The second is in 3 parts. The first third is adult trauma. Second third is developmental trauma and discussion of adverse child event score.
Yes.
And then the third part is then modalities of treatment for trauma that we know that the author has found to be successful.
Okay.
That's actually how I uncovered my trauma patterns.
Okay. You just inspired me. I'm gonna be honest with you. I've had that book on my desk probably for 6 months now. So now I'm going to read it.
It took me a year. It took me a year
to read.
Yeah. Well, not because I'm a slow reader, of course, but I listen to audible books because that's how I find if I'm driving to and from court, which I am a lot. That's when I have the moment. That's when I have a moment to
your
actually.
brain is there and
right,
you can process and absorb. Yeah.
But it took me a year. My recommendation would be to read something that's a little bit lighter that because you do a lot of heavy work like I do, and so sometimes your spirit, your soul just isn't able to handle.
You need to recharge.
Yeah, you don't have. I don't have the extra bandwidth to even start contemplating how I've been hurt in the past or these other things. And so let me think about something that's a little bit more uplifting. Not that Bessel van der Kolk's book is bad, but because it hits home so succinctly. It's an amazing book, and I would recommend.
Man, that's awesome.
Yeah, so
that's awesome. So the name of the book again is
Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score.
The Body Keeps the Score. I definitely recommend that. In fact, I'm going to during my parenting class on Mondays, I'm going to start promoting that book as well.
That's
there's wealth of information.
There's so much out there, and there's so much science behind what's going on.
Yes.
Mel Robbins in her book The High Five Habit talks about the reticular activation system, which essentially is and this all ties into, it's all tied together. The reticular activation system is the biological Facebook algorithm of the human body.
Yes.
Our brains process 23.4 gigabytes of information on average a day. The reticular activation system is the system that allows about 4% of that information to our conscious self.
Wow.
And so the 4 things it allows in are when we hear our name, right? We're talking and you hear your name out there, you didn't hear anything else. Well, your brain heard it, but it didn't process. It let into your consciousness your name. But if you heard your name, then you must have heard everything else. But it's not processing.
You did, but
right?
Exactly.
And then when your significant other is interested in copulation, third one is danger, perceived or real. Right. So that's that spidey sense. I don't really know what's going on. I can't put my finger on it, but we need to get out of here. Right? Reticular activation system. And finally, the fourth one, and this is why it's so important how we talk to ourselves, is it knows what our unconscious biases are. And so, and what it does is it reinforces what we have as an unconscious bias.
Yes.
And so if you believe
everything else is filtered.
Right. If you believe that if you are in shame, I believe that I am unworthy and I'm unworthy and I'm a piece of crap and I'm always gonna be a crap and everything I do is a piece of crap, then it only lets in the stuff that reinforces that.
Exactly. A compliment will be, oh my goodness, they will get upset.
They get upset, but that's that reticular activation system, which is why you can't convince someone of something that they believe unconsciously.
Exactly.
But if we don't do the work to say, okay, what are my unconscious beliefs? Then we don't ever have the ability to get past the reticular activation system.
Yes.
To give ourselves a chance to know what we don't know, and so it's just. It's just been so incredible. It's so incredible.
It's awesome, man. But I'm blown away by the fact that here we have an attorney talking like a therapist, talking our language. It's amazing to me. And one of the things I do, just to piggyback off what you just said was, when I work with kids, teenagers especially, I don't get into a lot of the science of it with them, but also try to get them to look at what are your core values, what do you believe, and let's focus on those things. And we had a case, literally, this kid's been in the system for 11 years. So we were ready for a battle. We think, oh my God, he's going to give us that trouble. We started teaching him and working with him. Within 6 weeks' time, he was changed because he was learning things that he had never learned before at his age, 15 years old. I mean, he was like absorbing it like a sponge. Still work to be done. Part of the work is like what you're doing, continue to grow, continue to challenge yourself, discipline, and all those things. But it took his parents almost a year before they could embrace the behavior, before they were willing to make the changes and recognize that, okay, this is what he did, but that's not who he is.
Right.
You know, his journey is he's been out of your home for 11 years. You guys are just starting to come back together.
Yeah, you don't know what he's gone through. You don't know what has happened to him.
No.
And you don't know what his unconscious beliefs are about who you are and letting it happen.
Exactly.
Or who he is, you know, and so it's
or
just
who
so
he is.
right.
And his interpretation of that, because a lot of his regression now is the things that happened over those 11 years. So she could just touch his hand and he's going to have a reaction to it.
Right.
You know, and you have to understand that he's not that little 4-year-old, you know. At times he can be, because that emotional age is going to show up sometimes. But overall, he has to go through a process. You need to go through a process, and then we can learn to integrate both of you back into relationship with one another. But if you're not willing to do the work, and he is, you're going to frustrate the relationship.
So Goethe, one of his quotes is that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And
Yes.
I believe that that's true on a micro and
Yes.
macro level. You know, so when you're talking about your family unit, you're going to be the average of the 5 people in your family unit you spend the most time with. When you're talking about your work life, you're going to be the average people that you spend the most time with.
Yes.
And so, but you're also, when we talk about trauma, we talk about intergenerational trauma and family trauma, that's also the reason why those things are important. Is it's almost like a family ritual, right? To a certain extent, some of these behaviors that have happened in our families, it's, hey, happened to me. My father did it to me. I'm going to do it. You know, I remember being
even with women who have been molested.
Right.
Some women can't even talk to their mothers about it.
No.
Because as soon as you say he touched me, they shut down.
Right, because it
happened to them.
Because it happened to them, and that's part that not looking at it,
yes.
and not. But you know what
it keeps me in a place where I can function.
It becomes that demon that is chained in the basement.
Yes.
And eventually it starts to crack and shake the foundations of
yes.
everything.
Everything.
And it's
misunderstood behaviors.
Right. And because other things are you are exactly the misunderstood behaviors because you're reacting to the I think so when I do my interpersonal string theory, I wish I could do my diagram. But when I do my large circle with a 3-circle Venn diagram, physiological, cognitive, emotional with a centerpiece of spiritual.
Yes.
Right. I can start to, even with myself, to think about what my traumas were. Mm-hmm. I can start putting them somewhere in that Venn diagram because I'm like, it affected these areas of me. It affected my spiritual, when I think spirit, like it affected that ethereal thing that makes us a human being.
Right.
And so it affected that part, but it also affected my emotion and my cognitive process mm-hmm. because I tied these things emotionally and thought process together.
Right.
And so you can almost find the spot and put the dot, and then I draw a circle around it. People have had a core injury to their body, right? Or people have gotten infected. Well, the infection wasn't the original wound.
No.
It's the necrosis that happens around it. And it's the body, or and sometimes with the trauma, it's the psyche's desire to try to protect it, and it's to try to not let that thing happen again. So we're going to put this necrosis out here so that nothing can ever get back to this thing.
But nothing can get in.
Nothing can get in, but it's also that's pain. Right? And if our consciousness is so inward because the pain is so painful, we don't pay attention to who we're harming. Mm-hmm. Right? But if we're also oblivious to the pain and what's going on inside, then we're paying too much attention to the outside, how we're interacting with other people, getting our responses from them, and not actually having a connection with who we are as a being.
Right. Hurt people. That's it.
Right.
We have a shirt we call Heal People, Heal People. Right. That's what I want to focus on now, the healing aspect of it. And healing is a process.
Right.
It's a journey. I mean, you can't just take a pill and think you're going to be healed. Right. Because there are layers. And I like your diagram. You showed it to me. I saw it on it, the intersection. There's a lot of intersections. And a lot of times people are not conscious of those things because we're not taught. We're not taught. You can, if you could do this, maybe we can put it on the screen.
Okay.
On a YouTube broadcast. If you send it to me, we can get her to integrate that in. But that is so important. He said, "Hold it up."
Oh yeah, here we go. If you can read my chicken scratch, but we'll get something. So this is the way. So these are the original Venn diagrams. A Venn diagram is over circles that overlap. This outer circle that's our ego, trauma, and shame version of ourselves, right? I am who I think you think I am. This is who we are, but within inside of it is the physiological. So everything with our body and all these other things. Cognitive, the way we think, our value system, other processes. And then emotional is I've seen some other older versions of discussion of these different parts of us, calling that the soul.
Mm-hmm.
Like calling it the soul. The soul is the emotional existence of being. I don't know how I feel about that. But then in the center is this spiritual part, right? That's this other thing. And then I always think about this is consciousness here, somewhere there, and it's either inward or it's either outward. As far as what we want is balance.
Right.
But when I think about things, and I think that everything exists this way, it's almost like proton, neutron, electron, and nucleus.
Yeah.
It's the building block of the world. But it's almost like we exist this way.
And every cell in our body has been is stored, and it gets passed down. Because you can even see generational anxiety in families or sexualized behaviors in families, because that energy, if it's not processed, if it's not expressed, it gets passed down. And I always tell people what's not transformed gets transferred.
Right. Well, but that also goes back to family behaviors, right?
Yes.
My father was a son of the belt, so I was a son of the belt. And for a long time, I said my children will be son of the belt because I was a son of the belt.
Exactly.
Right? And I turned out just fine.
Exactly.
Right?
So
they said, and so
and you going through your stuff and now you're conscious of it.
Right. And then almost
in relationships.
And that's interesting. We have the children, and then we do the same things to them that harmed us. And I think of it. I always thought of that as almost a way to take back the thing that we lost.
Yes.
I think of trauma actually more as a grief process. I think of it as getting stuck in a grief process that you didn't know that you were supposed to go through, and you don't know what you lost.
Exactly.
But if you are abused by mom and dad, what did you lose? The fact that the house is safety. The belief that the people that are supposed to nurture you will actually nurture you. They won't actually harm you.
Yeah.
And so think about the cognitive values that we lose and the emotion that is attached to that, right? I'm losing all this cognitive value and this emotion. And now it's represented in the body, right? That's how it goes. Cognitive process. Mom's going to take care of me. She's not going to harm me. Then she abuses me, and I can't accept a hug from her anymore because I don't know if she's going to hit me or hug me.
Not just her, but anyone.
And now anyone, right? And now that becomes that's the necrosis around it. I was hugged, but in the past, so I can't be hugged now.
Right.
That family touching that boy's hand, and he takes back because the people that used to touch his hand where he comes from, abused him. That was the cue that something's about ready to happen to you.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Well, we are closing out today. I want to thank you.
But we have hours more that we have to talk about.
We're going to come back. We're going to come back. What I want to do is finish this, and I'm hoping that we can get some feedback. And then we'll come back and do a part 2.
I can't wait.
Okay.
Can't wait.
Me neither. I've enjoyed this. This has been a great hour of learning. I tell people all the time, I'm a student and I'm a teacher.
Yeah.
We learn so that we can teach. And it's a part of our journey and our process. So thank you for being with us today on Quadrants of Mental Health. I have as my special guest, Mr. Charlie Inch. He is an attorney in the Richmond area, believe it or not. He may not have talked like an attorney today, but he is an attorney. He's been practicing for 14 years in the Richmond area. Give your website one more time.
So it's Inch Law. The website is traumainformedlaw.com. My name's Charles Inch. It's been a pleasure to be here today. I was really excited to share and learn from you as well.
It's awesome. Thank you, and we will see you next week. Enjoy the journey.